Hi guys, how y'all doing? I spoke with a guy yesterday and I consulted with him on the phone about him starting the movie business. And one thing that came clear to me even after watching all my videos and watching the videos on how to raise prices and so on and so forth, that he did not understand the concept of profit margin. And I've had a couple other emails and stuff that I've talked to people, and it comes clear that you guys don't understand profit margin and how it relates to your prices. So let's explain that here in a second. Hi guys, I'm Jay Burnham, and this is the Real Jay Burnham Show, and I am so glad you guys come in each and every day, come and watch my videos. Now I want you to do something for me. You guys are coming to these videos, you're watching, and I really truly appreciate it, but you got to subscribe to this channel. It's easy. You go right down there to that little red button, and you hit it, and you subscribe. The more subscribers I get, the more likes I get, the more this video gets seen by others, and more people come and learn about these wonderful techniques. All right, so let's get into the meat and bones of this thing and talk about profit margin. Okay, and let's get the difference between profit markup and the profit margin. The profit margin is basically that it's not the profit, right? It's the percentage that you get from each and every job. Okay, and then a markup is how much you got to mark up your services or goods to get the ideal profit margin. So markup is how much you actually raise the prices so that you get the proper profit margin. And we'll go over and explain a little bit of that to you a little bit more in here in a second. But basically what profit margin is that the difference between how much you make revenues versus your expenses. Okay? For instance, we're going to use the example that your average move, and we're going to use the movers as an example because I'm a moving company. Let's say your average move is $400. Now this applies to your construction business, landscaping business, hair salon, store that sells goods. Let's say you got a comic book store or some sort of retail store. This all applies. This is very much apropos to every single business across the boards. Okay? Let's say that in our instance, dang fly, God, a little gnat or something flying around and bugging me. You make $400. That's how much, not make. It costs you $400 for two guys with a truck to do, let's say, a two-bedroom apartment. All right, that's our example, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use it. Now it's cost. That's how much it costs you. That's the trucks, the mileage, the gas, the maintenance, the insurance, advertising costs, building expenses costs, payroll. That's all figured into that $400. Okay, all the expenses that you have is encapsulated in that $400 every time you do a job, that for that particular job, or let's say that's for every job. All right, so that's $400, but you make $500. Well, what's the profit on that? The profit is $100. What is the profit margin? The profit margin is 20%. Okay, and that's a good profit margin you should be making. That's a little ideal. Now, like if you're a retail store, you want to get 50%, 70%, 80% profit margin. And if you watch the shows like Shark Tank, and someone comes in and says, "I make something, it costs me 30 cents to make, but I make $5." That's a huge profit margin. You see what I'm saying? Because if your expenses are 30 cents to make it and ship it and do all that good stuff, but you're making $5 off of it, that's a very healthy profit margin. All right? But if you're doing it, something costs you 30 cents to make and you're only making 35 cents, that's a very small profit margin. All right? The profit is obviously a nickel, 5 cents. That's actually not a bad profit. But it really depends on your industry and so on and so forth. So in the moving industry or in the construction, a 20% profit margin is actually very standard. People could go a little higher. I would prefer like 30% or more. I think if you get into the 30% or more, that's when you're doing really well. But that's beside the point. But let's just hypothetically say we're going to go with the 20%. Okay? So 500 is how much you get the revenue minus the cost, which is $400, gives you $100 profit. That's your profit. But the profit margin, the margin of profit is only 20%. That's not a heck of a lot. Okay? So your profit margin is 20%. Now your markup is how much do you actually need to mark up? You know, $400, how much do you got to mark it up to get $500? Well, people say it's $100. Not so fast. Not so fast. Okay? We'll go over that. So let's go and we just went over how you calculate profit. How you calculate profit, the formula is right here. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. Okay? Our example was we made $500 for the job. It cost us $400 to do the job, leaving us with $100 profit. Okay? Really pretty simple. That's what we need to know. So now we want to figure out what is the profit margin to that. Okay, simple again. We've already went over it. So the formula, how to calculate your profit margin, the formula is profit divided by revenue equals your profit margin. So your profit, which was $100, which we figured on the last sheet, our revenue was $500. Our profit margin then equals 20%. So 100 divided by 500 equals 0.20. 0.20 is 20%. Okay? Now, how much do we need to, if we want to make 20%, how much do we need? Well, we'll step back. Let's go over something else. So how do we figure out what kind of profit margin we want? Okay, so how much do we got to figure out for our profit margin? Okay, and let's say we want 20%. So let's just use that. We're using that, but it could be 30%, 50%, and so on and so forth. Okay, so here's how we figure out profit margin. Okay, we know it cost us $400 to do the job. We want a 20% profit margin. So how you figure that out is cost divided by 1 minus the percentage you want, the amount of profit you want. In this case, it's 20%, and that will give you your profit margin. So let's go through that math. $400 is what it costs us, divided by 1 minus 20%, or how you rewrite it is 400 divided 1 minus 0.20 equals, so 1 minus 0.2 will equals 0.8. Okay, that's our formula. So our formula, when you write it out, it's 400 divided by 0.8 equals $500. So if we want a 20% profit margin to our costs, we got to figure out what our costs are, and then we got to use this formula. If we want a 30%, you got to do 30%. If you want 40%, you got to put 40 here, 50, 60, so on and so forth. You see where I'm going with it? This is how you figure out how much you got to charge for your goods and service. Okay? So that's how do you figure out your profit margin. Now, how do you figure out your markup? How do you figure out the markup? Okay, that's easy. The formula is profit divided by cost equals your markup. So our profit, $100, right? Divided by cost, $400. Our markup was 25%. Now you're like, wait a minute. How is it 25% when you're getting 20% profit margin? If it's a 20% profit margin, how can the markup be 25%? Easy. If you go back to the formula, right, for figure out profit margin, notice we're doing 400 divided by 0.8. We're not doing it by a full 100 or 100%. We're doing it by 80%. Okay. So basically, we're dividing 80%. So that's where you're getting the discrepancy. So to get 20% profit margin, you got to mark up your sales or your profits by 25%, so that you can make up for the loss in the profit margin plus that profit margin. Does that make sense? Are we coming clear on this? Okay, so markup is different than your profit margin, and they're going to be different ratios, right? So you got to understand the difference between markup and versus profit margin. All right. So if you want a 20% profit, you're going to have to give yourself a markup of 25%. It seems kind of counterintuitive, and that's where a lot of business people fail. They don't understand the differences between profit margin and profit markup. And a lot of people, that's where they're screwing themselves, and where they're leaving a lot of money on the table. Now, to get back to the story, this young man, he called me yesterday, and he was calling me up, and he was telling me about his business and how much he was charging. And I said, man, you gotta raise your profits. You gotta raise your profit margin. And he didn't understand what I was talking about. All right. So let's say I offer my services at $100 per hour for my job. Okay, it's $100. You offer at $75. Obviously, you're cheaper than me. But let's take a look at the actual math. Okay, because my profit margin is higher than yours. My cost, let's say, is $50, and your cost is $50. So everything being equal, your profit margin and my profit margin are going to be completely different. While you make 25%, you make $25, that's your profit. I make $50. So what is my profit margin compared to yours? Your profit margin is 50%. 25 divided by 50 is 50%, or 0.5, right? So you've actually went 50% higher than the cost. Your cost is $50. You went up 25, so that's only half. You went up half of what it cost you, right? So you went up 50% is your profit margin. My profit margin, however, is 100% because I went up a full $50. Okay, so let's go on with the story. So he's doing $75. I'm doing I'm doing 100. How many jobs does he have to do to make as much money in profit margin as I am? Well, in this scenario, he would have to do 2. He would have to do 2 jobs for every 1 job I do. So it's not just a matter of raising your profits. It's also raising your profit margin. This is why I said in raising your prices that you don't just raise your prices, but you got to also lessen your expenses. All right? By lessening your expenses and raising your profits, you increase your profit margin. All right? And this is how you make more money in business. Are we getting it clear here? Right? So, now this young man has to do 2 jobs for every 1 job I do. So the lower you charge as compared to me, you have to do 2, 3, 4, 5 times as many jobs as I have to do doing 1 job. Because I'm making more money than you are. every job. Does that say? You can just raise your prices willy-nilly, but if you're not using the profit margin, that really doesn't make a difference. You got to use the formula for profit margin so that you actually have more profit. You can raise your prices, but if you're also raising your expenses, your profit margin still stays low. And if your expenses are raising more than your profit, you decrease your profit margin. So you can raise your prices all you want, but you still got to keep the expenses low and keep that gap. So if your expenses rise really high, then you got to raise your prices commensurate to your expenses so that you get the proper profit margin that you need to survive in your business. Make sense? Okay, so just raising your prices isn't going to necessarily make you more money. Raising your profit margin, however, will. Okay, and you got to make sure that you do the right markup to get your right percentage that you need. Here's a real life example. There was a construction guy, and he was trying to teach his daughter the difference between profit margin. This guy's been in business for 15 years. He knows the formula, how backwards and forwards, right? Okay. So he's teaching his daughter about bikes, right? And a profit margin of the bikes. The bike cost $120. So he's asked the girl, how much is the profit margin? The little girl goes, oh, I don't know. He goes, well, let's assume that the bike cost $100. The store is charging you $120. Okay? So this guy was using this formula. 120, which is, profit divided by cost, right? And so on and so forth. So that's your profit margin, right? That's the formula you use. So it's profit divided by cost. So the young girl goes, okay, the bike cost is charged $120. It cost the store $100 for the bike. So 120 minus 100 equals 20. 20 divided by 120 is how much? It's 16.67%, right? So she does it on the calculator. She goes 120 divided by the actual cost of the bike for the store, the expenses, right? So that's 20. 20 divided by the cost of the bike overall is 120, gives her a percentage of 16.67%. The girl does it on the calculator. She goes, Dad, I figured it out. Dad's like, okay, yeah, what is it? She goes, it's 16.67. The father goes, all right, yeah, sure. Actually, that's incorrect. Go back and do it again. So young girl goes, oh, I thought I did it right. Okay. Unsure of herself. She goes and does it again. Sure enough, what is she doing? She goes 120 minus $100 gives her $20 divided by 120. Sure enough, it's 16.67%. She goes, Dad, I get the same thing. And she shows him the calculator. The dad goes, okay, well, and he does it. And he comes out with 16.6. But he goes, that doesn't make sense. It should be 20%. Where's his problem? And this is probably where your problem is as well. See, he's using the cost of the store's cost for the figure to be divided by. So basically, he's going 120 minus 100 is 20. 20 divided by 100 is 20%. But he's doing 20. He's going, so he figures, okay, so $20 plus 100 is 120. That's 20% markup. That's a 20% profit margin. No. See, no. That's not. By mathematics, that's not. It's 16.6 is the profit margin. So to get to 20% profit margin, he has to mark up more than he has to for his profit. I'm hoping I'm making sense here. All right. I'm hoping you guys figure this out. It can be a little confusing, but the markup is different than the margin. That's all you need to really know. So if you want a 20% profit margin, then you need to figure out what your costs are. Where's the thing? Profit, right? here it goes. So if your costs are $400 to do a 2-bedroom for 3 hours, it's cost you 2 guys with truck, cost you $400, and you want to make a 20% profit margin, you got to mark up appropriately. That again, it's the profit divided by the revenue, not the cost. Okay? Not the expenses, by the revenue. And that's the difference. Most people divide, I'm sorry. I screwed that up. I've got all the papers here and I'm looking at the back. My bad. So it's profit divided by the cost. What is the profit? $100. In this case, it costs, the move is $500. The cost is $400, gives us a 25% markup. Okay? It costs us 25% markup to get to the profit margin of 20%. Okay? So figure out what you need to do is figure out your expenses for the moves and average them out, whatever you need to do, so that you know what your average move is. Let's say you do your average move, or in this case, a construction job or whatever. When you go out to do your estimate and you figure out what it's going to cost you to do the job, minus the payroll, minus the gas, minus the insurances, blah, 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 then if you want to figure out, you want a 20% margin, then you got to figure out what your markup is going to be, right? So that means your profit margin, you got to know what your profit margin is and be able to mark up accordingly, okay? All right, so you can raise your prices, say you raise your price to $450. That's awesome, but that doesn't, it's a 10%. All right, guys, so sorry about that brief interlude there. But basically, just want you to make sure that you get a difference between the profit margin and the profit markup, okay? And if you guys have any further questions on that, you're still a little confused on that, feel free to go over this video several times, but make sure you leave me a comment below, and I'll try to do what I can to explain it, all right? Because sometimes even I kind of confuse myself sometimes. So sometimes it can get a little confusing, all right? All right, so let me know how I can help you. Leave me a comment below. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like this video, go to hell. Ha ha ha. I say that joke all the time. I got to come up with new material. Figure it out for me. Leave me a comment below. Also, make sure you share this with all your family and friends. And don't forget, subscribe to this channel. All right, guys, thank you. I love you. You guys have a great day. All right, bye-bye.